I'm talking today to James Greenshield, who's the co-founder of the Resilient Leaders Foundation and the Put Your Hand Up campaign. And I read today an old article in the Huffington Post where you wrote about hardening up and said at that point, anyway, I was so hard I couldn't feel. And that statement really stuck with me and is probably behind some prompts in the last couple of weeks that have led me to want to be in conversation with you. You know, I really related to some posts you made just recently about empathy and grief, and you know, how we need to be expanding the conversation there. So if we can open from that point, I think it'd be great. So, you know, what's your thinking and feeling there around that?
My humble opinion is that society's lost the ability to feel in any mirror of or match between the heart and the mind. Grieving has become a cognitive process, but you can't think yourself through an emotion. You have to feel it. As a society, we've lost ritual, we've lost ceremony, and a deep understanding and attachment to what these things give us. The Maori have the tangi, which is their process of, as you're probably aware, their process of celebrating and mourning for the grieving and passing of a loved one. Interestingly enough, of which for the widow, suicide is actually a valid and accepted form of grief. Which is pretty full on if you think about it, especially from our perspective, because of the way that our society and culture has been bred to fear death as opposed to embrace it, as opposed to, say, the Tibetan cultures and other Eastern mystical cultures, which would humbly say that for you to live, you must fully embrace death as well.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you've heard of a man by the name of Stephen Jenkinson.
Yes.
Yes.
You shared him with me the other day, the grief walker.
Yes, yes. So, you know, two of the things he says that I just so identified with, he says we've become death phobic and grief illiterate. And those two phrases really, really just resonated so strongly. You know, he says, or has said in the past to many of the people that he's supported at end stage of life or moving through grief, he says, you know, why are you so surprised about death? So he has this really deep understanding of death as part of a normal cycle. And he relates it a lot to the seasons in nature. And, you know, we plant a seed, the tree grows, it lives for however long, and then it dies. And along that pathway, it changes, it transforms. Every year it goes through a cycle. And
if you look at a gum tree as well, that in a hard time, it will allow a certain branch to die. Not the whole tree, but it will allow a limb to die and drop and then go back to regenerate because it knows exactly what it needs to do. And this is where I think we've certainly lost that deep-seated knowledge from our ancestors, and for many different reasons. But it takes me back to a point where 2005, 2003, I was still in the military, and my father was on his deathbed, literally in his bedroom. The last thing that Dad saw that I helped him see was the Tallarook Ranges in the middle of Victoria, and they were what he jackarooed on at the age of 15. So that was a beautiful thing, and took him into his bedroom. 3 days later, put morphine in him at 1 o'clock in the morning, and Mum woke us because the death rattles had really set in by about 3:30, and myself, my sister, and her husband, and my partner at the time, Kirsty, who's my wife, with Mum, we were all around him, and he passed at about 5:30. The undertaker came, and the undertaker and Dad had a bit of a joke going because Dad was also a priest as well as a farmer, and did a lot of work on with the police at accident scenes, giving last rites and often cleaning up mess. So the undertaker and Dad had a bit of a joke who was going to you know, come out of retirement and take the other one out of their deathbed. Well, luckily for me, the undertaker didn't ask for payment of the joke, but you know, he's very, very good about it. And we put Dad onto the gurney, and Dad went out. And then I organised a funeral with the army, with the police, with the country fire authority, with farmers, with the clergy. Like the streets in Seymour was lined for about 500 metres on both sides. And it was a massive celebration of Dad. And the next day I went bush. I donned the uniform again and went straight out bush for another 6-week training program, training soldiers how to run around. And I thought, well, the funeral's done. I've finished grieving, haven't I? I didn't realise what grieving was. I didn't understand how I'd lost connection through my heart to sadness. And it wasn't until I crashed myself in 2007, 2008 with post-traumatic stress that in my journey home of finding myself, I actually had to go through that grieving process of my father. And in the process, heal so many wounds that I had brought with me unbeknownst at that time, like homophobia. I had become a homophobe, which in healing that wound and realizing that was about my instability in my own sexuality, I came to a realization I had to forgive myself of closing a bit of myself down to my father's love that he really wanted to give me. So the grieving process was very much forgiving as well, for decisions I'd made about myself in the past to come to a point of closure of grief where Dad died, my best friend, but I'm closer to him now than I think I ever was when he was alive.
Yeah, yeah. And I nursed for 16 years, and I did a lot of things back then, just coming from my authentic self. Like I wasn't as aware then as I am now. And, you know, I'm really appreciating now. Oh my goodness, look at how I remember in my second year, so I would have only been 18, a girl came in from a motor vehicle accident with her head almost decapitated, but still alive. And her parents were there, and there's a huge huddle around the table, and they're endeavouring to do what they can. And every now and again, I'd get explicit instructions about a message to go and tell the family. And I remember doing that. I remember that night distinctly. And when I look back, I think, how did I do that? You know, I would barely have been able to manage my own shock and horror, let alone then go to engage with these people. But I did, and I did it repeatedly. And there's something about, in nursing, you learn to create a really high trust environment very quickly. Yeah. You know, it happens in a very short space of time. So to be able to engage authentically and deeply in the worst of times is probably one of the biggest gifts we can bring in our interface with others. To like I probably did have to have a little, you know, draw myself up a bit, and probably stepped into a persona, the nurse persona. And there are, you know, many other kind of stories, and it's like that so serves me now. And I've endeavoured to analyse how was it that we did that, you know, and some of it would have been stereotype. I can trust this person. But there was something else too.
How did it feel for you to be in that authentic space?
It's a real privilege.
Yeah.
It's a real privilege. I can feel myself quite emotional around that. I gave I was taken on tour by the Real Estate Institute in New Zealand, and 5 locations, 100 real estate people, all who sat in the audience with their left leg crossed over their right and their arms folded, who really didn't want a bar of this funny...
Not defensive at all.
End of the day, and let's let her do a thing. But the last session, in one of the country towns. When I arrived, the organisers called me aside and they said, Pat, it's been a dreadful day today. One of our members suicided last night. He hung himself. His wife came home and there he was in the garage. And today has just been terrible. No one is talking. The presenters have come and gone, and all you can hear at morning tea and lunch was, you know, the clink of cutlery. And I'm on next and I'm meant to be funny. And I said, you know, whoa. I said, so, right, how would you like to handle this? And they said, well, we've no idea. We hope you might have one. And I don't know where this came from, but I said to them, well, actually I do. I said, when we go in, you come with me. I said, and tell me all of this again in front of the room. That then gives me permission to speak into it. And so I had, you know, no preparation time really. And so I just acknowledged where I felt people would be. I said, I asked permission to put a prayer into the room. And then I asked permission. I said, you know, I've been brought here to, you know, be the light spirit at the end of the day and have you leaving in a lot of goodwill. And I said, I actually would like to still give that same presentation. So if you're happy with that, I'll proceed. So there was this invitation thing that I'm noting, posting it. And I get about 10 or 15 minutes into it and someone put their hand up. I need to put it and got his business card out. And he said, Pat, just a minute. He said, every single one of us here we've been calling ourselves property valuers. And he said, I wonder if we had identified ourselves in a different way, whether we might have had our eyes open to see where our colleague might have been, you know, giving signs, but we were missing it because we were so focused here on valuing this, which was a profound moment. And I got a letter afterwards from the organisers just honouring what I'd done on that day. So, and we can only do that if we have the courage to slip into who we are and not try and be something else.
Part of my work on myself has been completely owning who I am, so I don't have to slip in or out anymore. I can just be. It's been a process, it's a journey, and at times I still find myself in some environments reacting to the environment as opposed to interacting with the environment, but I am far more balanced within myself to do that. And I go back to your point about the privilege. It's a humbling experience to be there, hold space, to develop that trust, as you beautifully place and put, so that people can go through the process they need to go through, and feel okay, not feel judged. And that's what a lot of the time I think people. So I went to a beautiful lady's funeral in Central Victoria. I called her Auntie when I was young because, you know, she was a neighbour on a property, probably one of the closest ones at about 20 kilometres away. And I always knew her number, and I still do to this day, 938-263, bang. If I ever needed to ring, I'd ring that number. And she passed, and it was a beautiful country celebration, all the family there, but there's so many people there. Country Women's Association had made sausage rolls, which were to die for. You know, it was a beautiful feast. But my mum turns to me and goes, "It's good. I was able to hold it together." And I said, "Mum, what does hold it together mean?"
Yeah.
She says, "No, I was just able to hold it together." And I acknowledged that Mum did not want to go into that conversation. So I didn't press, I didn't push. But in essence, what she's saying is it's not okay for her to cry. It's not okay for her to actually allow herself to express. And Mum's got an incredible amount of grief in her. So another situation was a mate rings me the other day and says, "Can I chat?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. What's up?" They'd been at a party, and a friend he said, "I'd known this guy since we were in utero together," which I thought was what a beautiful way of saying what a great friendship they'd had. And they were at a party and someone walked outside, and this guy had hung himself using the uprights of the swing, the baby swing of the guy who owned the house, and he was just literally hanging there in the swing, and it really rocked them all. And so he was going down. He called me just at the airport, going down to the Central Coast for the funeral. And he says, I don't know what to do. And so I asked him a couple of just quick questions. I said, so why are you going to the funeral? And he said, he got a deep sense of understanding that he was there for other people. And I said, so cool. So what are you going to experience there? What's going to be happening? And he was able to articulate that there'll be a lot of different people with a lot of different emotions, everything from anger to desperation to complete why, and everything in between. So I asked him a couple of quick questions, which he realised, in essence, he was going down to hold space for other people to go through what they were. He was a big personality, and he was known as you can go and just cry on his shoulder. And the beautiful thing was that he was able to go and do that at the same time of holding space, go through his own process, and at times lead by just feeling that emotion that he's feeling at the time and letting it flow in an appropriate way.
So yeah, we're just talking about grief, and having to, for grief to happen properly, we have to allow ourselves to go inside, internal, which means that we're going to desire this protection or feeling safety, and as you beautifully put it, this trusted, empathetic environment to allow us to go down. And it can feel suffocating at times. It can feel like I'm going to drown in this sorrow. But if we allow ourselves to go right down and we surrender to it, it's like when we come up, we take this breath, and it's like it's the first breath for the rest of our life, or it's like this weight of it has just been taken off our shoulders. And most people who've experienced that will know what we're talking about. That's really allowing the sadness to be experienced. We got taken to see a movie called American Sniper. I don't know if you've seen it. It had Bradley Cooper in it playing an American guy. It was directed by Clint Eastwood. I don't go and see too many more movies anymore. And but Bradley Cooper, I feel, is an aware character, and Clint Eastwood, I was interested in what take he would put on this movie. And it's about this guy who he's a sniper and he kills a lot of people in Iraq. But that's not what the movie's about. It's about this man who was a cowboy, joins the military, goes to Iraq 3 times, each time loses more and more of himself. And he's got this beautiful wife played by Sienna Miller. And right at the end of the movie, won't give anything away, but she just looks at him because he comes in with his cowboy boots and his buckle on, and he mucks around with the kids. And she just looks him in the eye and she says, "Thank you for coming home." And I just started to cry, because that's my story. My wife, Kirsty, waited for me to come home during my journey. So I walked aside, and I had a mate with me who also that day taught me how to get a choc top ice cream, eat the chocolate off the top, dunk it in popcorn and eat it. Have you ever done that?
No.
If you haven't, that just brings joy. It's a joyous moment, Anyway, so I took that away. But we're walking out and we're just about to go for a beer. And all of a sudden this wave came up, and we're just outside this cinema in Newcastle. And I walk over to the side of the footpath where this hedge was, and I just started to cry. Just stood there and just cried. Now, my mate is just this beautiful masculine brother. Stood by me, just right next to me. He's a pretty big guy. And he just faced the other way. He just stood there, probably for 5 minutes. I don't know how long I was crying, but I just went. And then when I knew I'd finished, I grabbed my handkerchief out of my pocket, blew my nose, cleaned my face up, and looked up at him, and I took a breath, and I said, "Mate, do you want to go for a beer?" And he says, "Do you want to?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." Now, Dave did not expect me to share with him what had gone on. There was no expectation on his behalf. He just had my back. And I felt that love and compassion from him. Went over a beer, I explained what was going on, explained what that scene meant to me. And he pretty much figured it out because he knew me. He's a mate of mine. But what a beautiful example of a balanced person who knew exactly what to do. It wasn't about him. It was all about holding space for another person to go through that process.
Yeah. And I love what was demonstrated in that story. In my grieving programs, when people would share their stories, often another person in the room would go to the person talking and, hug them or put their arm around them. And it actually interrupts the flow. We kind of want to help and support, but you can actually block it.
Totally.
And, so people are forewarned, if you like, or pre-framed. I know you're going to feel compelled to do this, maybe, but please don't. Just allow it. And
that rescuing people.
Yeah, and that. So then you, the person who wants to, hold. I think you want to stop it. When you want to be the person holding, and there's an aspect of you wanting to stop that hurting. But there's a greater thing happens when you sit and just be present. Just be present to the outflow in whatever form.
And at times you possibly saw this as well. Just being present will actually ignite something within you that will want to flow as well. And just by being comfortable to experience and let flow your emotions, you can actually receive an incredible gift by, as you beautifully say, just being present, not having to stop anything. Matter of fact, just enable just by being there.
I saw a pair of musicians once. They played romantic ballads. She played the bass and he played acoustic guitar. And the night that I saw them, she was probably 8 months pregnant. And so there she is with the bass between her knees and this beautiful pregnant belly. He's standing beside her and they're singing these beautiful love songs, and he's directing them all to her, like he's looking down at her on and off all the time. And I just wept for who this baby's going to be. If this baby is growing and developing in that resonance, who is that child going to be? And so I sat there and I just allowed, tears just streamed. Like I wasn't sobbing, but tears just ran and ran and ran. No one else. And I'm really aware of people beside me a bit uncomfortable in their seats. But I just allowed it. It's like, and I wanted to say, but it would have interrupted, of course, but do you not see or feel the beauty here? This is profound. But
you would have been a conduit for so many other people too, in just by allowing yourself to go, you would have allowed energy to move in lots of other people, which is also beautiful. One of the things, we've mentioned suicide a number of times in this conversation. In my humble personal and professional opinion, we need to let go of the need to stop suicide, because it goes back to exactly what you've said, this desire to rush in and rescue people. And some people will need to leave the planet. That is just, and it's a really hard conversation to have. Matter of fact, it's interesting, my conditioning as a military officer and my conditioning of preparation psychologically of going to war and possibly losing soldiers, which, I was put into the predicament of numerous times. Luckily, I didn't lose anyone, although the Grim Reaper met me when I got hit by a roadside bomb. It doesn't speak too much to the old Grim Reaper. He's fairly non-conversational. But anyway, it conditioned me to realise we're going to lose people. And there's people on the planet which have got to a point where there's no coming home. And the most humane thing they can do for themselves is to leave. Now, I know a lot of spiritual traditions and religions, there's more religions say that is wrong. That's their prerogative. However, if we look at it from a compassion point of view, then we can understand, well, they're no longer in pain. So why will I hold this against us? And then we look at the ramifications of suicide, and we actually see that most of the issue stems around the immediate family and also the immediate friends and circle. And then so often what happens is they close ranks, and it's a reactive protection. It's not that beautiful holding space. It's a reactive, hard, rigid protection. which is caused because of emotional compression and suppression. And they will not acknowledge what's happened because they feel judgment of everyone else, which actually means they're judging themselves as, why? What have I done to do this? Why did this person commit suicide, etc.? So in judging that, they won't allow it to be spoken. This person decided to take their own life. Now, the article that you read a couple of weeks ago was sparked by me going to an amazing celebration of a young man who decided to take his own life. But if you were to look at those two parents, the courage they had in front of a couple of hundred people at this campground where we just celebrated, where there's music, there was festivities, there was crying, there was everything. Everyone was just allowed to flow. There was no shame. There was no judgment of anyone, including the young man who chose that path. There was complete compassion and acceptance of the situation, and there was a readiness and willingness to accept meaning through this suffering. And it was humbling being in the presence of such courage. The mother gave the eulogy, supported by a husband, and those two, if you were to label anyone, they couldn't be more loving parents. So why does this happen? Why is one of the worst questions we can possibly ask? Because it goes nowhere except in circles. We'll never get the information completely to actually be able to understand it. So it just allows us to stay stuck. So it wasn't about why. It was just, this is the situation that's occurred. And people were saying, I haven't spoken to you in 10 years. Why did I allow that to happen? And if anything, it brought everyone together, which is what the whole process is all about. So we're going to lose people in suicide. And it's not about suicide now. It's more about bringing back emotional literacy and emotional intimacy into our community and our society so that we understand the highs and the lows, the troughs, the peaks. We understand what goes on inside ourselves is completely okay. There is no such thing as a negative emotion because we wouldn't have it. It's like an appendix. It's there for a reason, you know. It actually does produce digestive enzymes that our body needs. Our body can move around it without it, but it's a necessary part of us. Emotions all are a necessary part of us. Yes. And if we suppress them, there is irrefutable scientific, medical, peer-reviewed studies, now over 100,000, my understanding is, directly linking suppressed anger and sadness to cardiovascular disease, still the biggest killer in Australia. And I don't believe, although the statistics from the ABS will say the biggest killer of Australian men between 15 and 44 is still suicide, I don't believe that's the case. It's not the case. Suicide is the end state, the action that occurs when a person gets to that point. So we need to understand that it's shame and guilt suppressed deep down inside ourselves with no understanding and no ability to express and let go and heal and forgive. Once we understand that, we set up a whole structure within communities and families and individuals where we'll go through natural cycles of emotional flow. We'll be able to understand and we'll be able to read the emotions, the message the emotions are sending us. And funnily enough, I will almost guarantee, although I never will guarantee anything, but I'll almost guarantee you watch the suicide rates go down.
Yes.
Because things will be allowed to flow.
Yes. You know, I had an experience of domestic violence in my first relationship, and through a range of events ended up not telling anybody. I was matron of a hospital and a figure in society, in the, you know, the local community, and there was just no way that I was going to have that interfere. I endeavoured to share with my family, you know, that message was blocked. And so I told no one for 30 years. And 3 years ago, my immune system went haywire. I developed this huge, over a 6-month period, transformation of all of my joints in not a pleasant way. So it was like arthritis came on in all of my joints in 6 months. So a years of change really quickly, a bit like the werewolf, that kind of,
yeah.
That's how
transmutation.
I could see it happening in, you know, in my body, different different parts becoming deformed. And I know, because of all the work I've done around this area, that thoughts that I had back then about not being able to stand up for myself, left without a leg to stand on, couldn't support myself, all were related to my ultimate need to have a hip replacement, and then the problems that came with that immune and joint thing. So it's all linked, and there is science, of course, as you said, to reinforce that now. So, 30 years of silence. And, when I did tell somebody, they said, "Oh, I don't believe that." So, we can be left stumped. And, there's another language that ends up being embedded in our body that ends up, or can end up, having us embodying it.
Exactly. Emotions are stored in our body, and actually when someone psychologically receives trauma or holds a trauma, one of the easiest things you can do with them is get them to do a really simple activity, which is, in this moment, get them to start breathing and just center, and then ask them a really weird question, which is, are you inside or outside your body now? And what will actually happen when some of them won't be able to answer you because they won't be able to feel, but most of them will actually be able to go, "Oh, I'm outside my body." Now, some of them will believe they're inside their body, but they're not actually inside the body at all. Because that's where the pain is. That's where the emotional. It's actually it's held at an electromagnetic level, and the ancient Chinese knew this. Anger's held in the liver. They knew this. Cellular biologists are now proving that at a cellular level about the vibration held within certain cells within the beast. So it's all coming back to the ancients, and the sciences are coming together. And so when we to heal trauma, we actually need to bring the cognitive inside the physicality and allow the emotion to flow. And that allows the healing process to then bed in. But people have forgotten what healing is. They expect the pill and bang, it's all gone. No, when we heal, there's so often there's this healing crisis which is caused afterwards. And it's this settlement period, this recalibration period. Go back to grief. The widow would be clothed in black in many cultures for 12 months because it's not just that, it's this resettling, recalibration period of who she is. My mother is still Mrs. Allen Greenshields. It's the old way of talking about it. Dad passed in 2003. So we're 2019 now. So, and I love Mum for the fact that she holds that, and it's her way. There's no judgment about Mum nowadays. There was before, but come on, Mum, get over it, for crying out loud. That was about me. You got nothing to do with Mum. That was all about me. And so me owning that and dealing with my own process, I just love the eternal love that my mother has for my father.
Yeah.
But that healing needs to be done by the person inside the actual body.
Yeah. One of the things I say to my clients is sadness is love announced.
That's beautiful.
And the depth of your sadness is representative of the depth of your love.
Depth of your love.
And it's always,
Yeah.
And there are enduring loves, I'm guessing by what you're saying, your mum hasn't found another partner. Is that true? No.
Yeah.
And she may not, because that love was it.
Yeah.
And,
Exactly.
the whole notion of enduring love. One of the things I love to be able to lead my clients to, they have discord with family and not communication, etc. And, I teach them how to love them anyway. Love them anyway. And it doesn't matter if you never see each other. It's about holding a space, but you've got to have that willingness to go there.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's what the Dalai Lama says when he talks of compassion, and compassion being the ultimate healer. And it goes to the point though, when someone's in grief, they don't need more grief. So don't feel that you need to be depressed or sad when someone's in grief. They actually just need love and compassion. And so be present with them with an open heart and a compassionate heart. and just allow them to do what they need. You don't need to do anything. It's not about you. And this is one of the biggest things that we get stuck on. And so therefore it causes us to react into a certain way around people that are going through some form of emotion. Remember, it's not about us. We can make it very quickly about us, but as you said before, rushing in and rescuing or wanting to do something like that. But no, it's not about us. I was out bush the other day with a bunch of men, and we needed to go into some serious anger. And one of the guys it was just brewing, so brilliant, went straight into it. Now, at the same time, there was another man who had been processing some deep stuff, and it was causing a really massive physiological response. And he'd just been sitting off to the side, just being. And all of a sudden, and he knew what we were doing because he'd done it before, and we went into this anger, and he charges over, and he tries to get involved, and I was intimately involved in the process, and my leg swung around and booted him off. And because that's what needed to happen. This space, and that's my warrior coming out, this space needed to be held. And get away. No, not now. This is about this person, not about you. Stay. And then afterwards, give him a big hug and talk openly about what had happened with no shame or judgment. Hey, dude, it's okay. You know, your heart is so huge, you wanted to charge over there and help, and that's just natural. Now we bring balance to the equation. We ground that energy, and we realize, no, okay, yeah, I chose the wrong path in that time. Now I can learn from that choice. I don't have to myself and beat the crap out of myself. So yeah, when we can go back to the point about society really can benefit now, well, actually the only way forward is to become not only emotionally literate, understanding emotions, but emotionally intimate, so that we can completely be with them. Otherwise, we're going to keep going down the way that government at the moment. There is no vision in this country, Australia. A matter of fact, there's very few countries in this world that have vision. As communities, we humbly believe at the Resilient Leaders Foundation, every issue on the globe can be solved at a community level within a global context. But at community level, there are very few communities with visions anymore, which is a binding thing. We are so fixated as a society about safety and security, we forget that's actually a surface level condition. What we all want is to belong. And if you want proof of this, watch what happens when someone truly feels they belong. Watch their level of not only loyalty, but courage in protection of the tribe. They will take a bullet for the tribe because of the sense of belonging they have. That's how powerful this is. This goes beyond sustainability and resilience to harmony and growth. That's where we need to go as a society.
Yes. I had a client in New Zealand, and her 4 boys revealed to her that their father had been interfering with them sexually. And over a 6-week period, she was very shocked, of course, but she was able to buy a new house, remove the children to safety, reported the father. He was ended up in jail, and she was able to, take the actions to create that safe place. But at the same time, she and I met in that first 6-week period, and I did a 4-day process with her. And she's using the same program I've been using for about 10 years. And she's the first person who, in that 4-day period, truly came to a place of compassion and forgiveness. It just astounded me. She ended up being the only person in the room, so no accidents there, really. So there was just her and I always have a helper who's, looking after the practicalities. So someone was looking after us, and I could just be present to her through this whole process. And such an extraordinary thing to see. So, and I use that story a lot, the detail of it. She would continue to grieve for some time, of course, but she would not suffer. There would be no suffering because she's reached this other place. And you know, all of her colleagues and family were really worried about her because they thought she's not, you know, she's not in that suffering space where, you know, she was grieving, but I think you'll understand the difference.
Massive difference.
She heralded another shift for me. It was like, yes, look at this, you know, they're, what might have, you know, you can't put a time on things. However, you know, in a 6 to 8 week period, she transformed totally. The most shocking set of circumstances to come to love.
What a powerful woman. And what a powerful process you're able to hold for her. That's incredible. Beautiful.
Yes, you know, and this, for me, this is my vision for 2020 is that we'll be having an intimacy revolution. So we're getting close.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing, you know. People ask me why I left the military when I had post-traumatic stress. One, I didn't decide to leave the military. I realised my time was up, so I needed to move on. I actually went lower when I left the military. I went suicidal post that because of depression and other factors. But the other thing that really came to me is you'll only ever heal to the extent that the tribe wants you to heal. And the military still has a massive issue with post-traumatic stress and depression and domestic violence, interesting enough. Thank you so much. You're an amazing woman. Just got bought a nice brew. The thing is, and my mum was talking to me also about Dad. Now, when I got back from my first deployment to East Timor, I was actually depressed because of what I'd seen over there. And Dad was instrumental in just helping me talk it out. And he was a Vietnam veteran. He came back with undiagnosed post-traumatic stress himself. He tried to get help in that realm, but no one could back then. So he turned his faith deepened. He became incredibly deep in his faith, and he never wanted to leave the property either. Never wanted to leave the land. That's where he needed to live, and that was cathartic for him. And the Indigenous of this country know so well, you know, to heal we must do it in concert with the land. But Mum says to me on the phone a couple of years ago, she says, "It's so sad that your father wasn't here when you got back from Iraq." And out of my mouth came the words, "Mum, if he was, I never would have healed from post-traumatic stress." And I now know that, you know, as healers and shamans of old, like the First Nation people have a very different opinion of adverse mental conditions. They see it as a spiritual awakening waiting to happen, or a healer ready to be birthed.
Yes.
And I really relate this now to the work that I do in helping other people, you know, birth their own healing abilities or birth their own purpose into the world. You can only ever help a person heal to the level you've healed yourself.
Yeah.
And I was asked to present to a bunch of academics and therapists and psychiatrists, etc. About 120 in the room one day down in Sydney. I was asked to present on masculinity and manhood. Now, the issue with them was that they actually thought that the two were the same. And I realized in the short time that I had, there was no point in that conversation. They wouldn't hear it. So I chose to completely redo what I was going to do, and I told my personal story. But right at the front, I said, I'm going to be completely open with you today. Some of you would call it raw. Some of you may actually get triggered by some of the things I say. If you can, some of you might even want to leave the room. But if I can just ask you to be present, at the end of the presentation, you may be able to receive a gift. And during the presentation, I launched into anger because I can snap into rage straight away because I've become one with that emotion. And I knew it wasn't mine. I was just, because of my empathetic abilities, were able to tune into a lot of the rage in the room. And I went in and out. And then I just kept going with the story. About a minute later, I brought them back to that. And I said, when I lost it before, and I corrected my words because my word was incorrect, I didn't lose it. There was one person in the room sitting very close to me who says, yeah, he knew that I was in complete control of what I'd done, the supposed outburst. And I asked the crowd, for an honest answer, please put your hand up who felt triggered. 85% of the room put their hand up.
Yes.
And I said, could I suggest that you guys have been talking about the trust divide. Practitioners talk about the trust divide, and you'd be fully aware of this. We talked about trust. How do I set that safe space up? How do I cross the coffee table in psychiatric terms? And my point to them, if you want to breach the trust divide, it starts with us. And the first step is to allow ourselves to heal, therefore lead by example to those whom want to be healed, and realize you don't heal anyone. You actually simply hold the space for the healing to actually commence, to actually be allowed to form. And we might take a person through a process, as you beautifully articulated, but I'm gathering by your deep level of connection, you fully understand that it's the person going through and allowing their psyche, spirit, and emotions to go through that whole process, which does the healing, where that gift to them, where that angel in their life right then, that allows them to see the gateway, see that door. It's their choice to go through the door, not my choice, but it's their choice. And when they do, that's the profound, humbling experiences that we can have.
Mm. And we've got a strong link to the quantum world, that part that I was talking about. One of the processes I use is a body casting process. I'll cast wherever I feel the pain has been stored. So in her instance, it was all the torso. And so apply the plaster Paris bandage, and there's a reverent process to go through when we go through that, drawing back to their story. And then it takes about 20 minutes for it to set. And then it needs to be eased off the body. You can't just go, all right, it's nearly dry now, and lift it off, because it'll actually break. It'll, crack or break. So they have to work from within and be a bit like a snake shedding the skin. So they've really got to come from that inner space. And this was my first experience, funny as it might sound. As her cast came off her belly, there was an expulsion of air or energy that sounded for all the world like how a rhino might fart. And we both were just in hysterics at the wonder and awe of that.
Wow. That is awesome in two respects. Firstly, the experience, and secondly, that you know what a rhino farting sounds like.
Well, I don't really. I'm just guessing.
I know, but that's amazing. That's awesome.
And
keeping it real, Pat. Keeping it real.
The deepest of, a reverent process, and then to have humour is not discord. We're being. I call it being appropriately responsive. We're present, and we're in this dance. And I can, if I'm leading somebody, I can choose to be inappropriate to get them out of a place or something, but you've got to measure. And know.
Which comes by being in the present moment, doesn't it?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
James, this has been amazing. We're going to continue to share with the viewers what's coming up shortly, and where can they find you online?
The easiest way to find us online is via Facebook, just James Greenshields, or the Resilient Leaders Foundation. We have a page. You can go to our website, which is not much on it at the moment, but resilientleadersfoundation.org. We're a national charity in Australia. I'm really excited at the moment. We're just about to launch a whole new online program called Harmonic Leadership, how to lead from a new way, a new space. You mentioned the quantum realm. It's bringing a lot of science, spirituality, emotions, cognitive work all into one place for us as leaders. Where everyone is a leader, whether or not we consciously know it or not. And when we can completely own that in a conscious and meaningful way, we're going to move this planet into where it needs to be. And this country, Australia, it's primed. It's primed for a new story. It's primed to become a leading component of the global shift. If we choose, we have such a rich background that dates back hundreds of thousands of years, not what the history books say. So it's harmonic leadership, a new way to lead is really exciting. The other thing we do is we just help through our keynote programs called the Masters in Conscious Leadership, which is a 12-month program about helping people really own themselves in all respects and step out into the world in the way that they're meant to impact in whatever realm that is, from being an amazing mother, which is one of the best jobs I reckon there is. And I just stand that I say that in humility, and from an outsider watching an amazing woman do it with our children, to being a person who really wants to impact it in all fields. So yeah, that's what we do. But we have a lot of online resources free for people on Facebook, particularly. I do a lot of videos, as you're fully aware. So, yeah, get online, like or befriend me, if that's a thing. Go from there.
Befriend, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Then
you
we can
so
officially become friends.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a joy. I'm trying to think. Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor. Have you seen
Yes.
TED Talk, My Stroke of Insight? When she hands back the brain, the live brain, or it's dead now, but the real brain to the attendant who's, looking after that aspect of her TED Talk. She gives it back to him, takes the gloves off, puts it on the tray and says, "Thank you. It's been a joy." And the audience bursts into peals of laughter. I recently used that. I lead a business breakfast group, and I'm very committed to their spiritual growth as well as, business acumen. And I used that talk the other day as a discussion point, and they hadn't seen it. And there was a standing ovation at the end, and I thought, well, this is unheard of. I've used that talk a lot to, spark conversation, but I've never had that. So there's a readiness and people being touched by things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's wonderful.
I think we're ready. It's a beautiful statement. There's a readiness here. Completely agree.
Yes.
Thanks for this conversation, Pat. It's been awesome.
Awesome.
Really love your work too. Thanks for your impact that you're having.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.